Good day, everyone. I will be talking about the passive phase of migration today. It's actually a concept, the passive phase. At some point in our lives, we all experience some forms of passivity. That time where we just feel laid back. We're not really able to think ahead, to move ahead. Sometimes it is like, a feeling of being stuck. Have you ever felt like that before? When it comes to migration, it happens. Even in life generally, migration actually has its own pull on people, unknowingly and knowingly. And at some point in time in life, everyone would actually have their own share of that faith, if they have migrated, if they ever migrate, that would happen. So when you look at the word passive, what does passive mean? Passive means accepting or allowing what happens to happen without much resistance. That is one of the dictionary meanings of passiveness or of passivity or of being passive. Just allowing things to just happen without you fighting back. I would say, when I say fighting back, not punching or doing things that are not called for. No, that's not it. So to be passive means to just be laid back. Something happens, you're not actively involved, you're just there. You're just allowing life to have its own share. You're just allowing life to just happen to you. And that's why many times when you see people at different stages in their lives, and when we also examine ourselves, we can actually see, yes, we've been through that phase. But sadly, some people carry on to become passive migrant. In another video, I've shared what it means to be a passive migrant. But let me just still continue to talk about passive phase of migration. When people are at that passive phase of migration, they do not take action. They just sit back. They allow systems, they allow things, they allow situation to dictate for them. They allow those things, what they're feeling at that moment to actually just control them. They feel they are not in control. You hear words like, whatever will be, will be. This place is hard. And sometimes you say, I cannot just kill myself. I can't kill myself. They use different words. Many times, it may not even be their real self. It's not who they are, but it's just that face. And usually, one of the things that actually makes people, or tips people into that passive phase of migration is when one, they don't actually have their own specific goals. They don't really know what they want to achieve with their migration. When you ask people, why did you migrate? Some will tell you, oh, I want my children, for people who have children, I want my children to be able to speak the Queen's English. That is not a reason enough to migrate. You hear people say, I actually don't have a choice, no alternative. That is still not a reason to migrate. You hear people say, where I am is not good. That is still not a reason to migrate. You hear so many excuses. I'm the breadwinner. That is why I have migrated. Why exactly did you migrate? You need to write down your own reasons for migration. And you need to, put down your goals. Now that I have migrated, what do I need to do? What am I supposed to be doing to experience that growth, to move on, to achieve all that God wants me to achieve? Let me just tell you a story from the Bible. about Nehemiah. They were taken into captivity, Nehemiah and some of the Israelites, they were taken captive. And at some point, he heard that something bad had happened. The Jerusalem had been burnt down, the walls had been broken. And he just felt he can't just sit back and watch the destruction of his families, of his generation, or of his descendant. He decided to act. He decided to stand up, to arise from that phase he was in. He was in an exile. He was a cupbearer, serving the king. Irrespective, he did not allow his position to deter him from doing what he was meant to do. He did not say, oh, let's say in this modern age, because this is what I do. He did not allow that to make him become passive, but rather he took action. He gathered his people around and they were able to repair and to rebuild Jerusalem. God has called you into rebuilding, into repairing. Perhaps that's one of the reasons you even migrated in the first place and you did not even know it. You just thought, oh, just maybe for people to say, oh, I've also traveled. Oh, bye bye. I'm no longer where I used to be again. There are many reasons, good reasons for migration. So let me talk about the characteristics of passive migration. One of the first things that happens is that, people move with the flow. They don't really have their own goals, like I said. They just moved because others were moving at the time. But one of the things that now happens that actually catches them unaware is actually cultural shocks, religious shocks, shocks of different kinds, life shock. And they're like, hey, what am I doing here? I used to tell people for years, I used to ask, God, why am I here? 5 years after, I still used to ask, like every day, God, why am I here? I did not just sit back, but I just allowed God, to continue to, bet in me. I just allowed God to continue to help me, to give me a purpose. I also, had to think, okay, what exactly do I want? What do I want to achieve in this journey? I did not just sit back watching. I waited on God, but I was also actively involved in the process. Sometimes when people talk about waiting on God, they think is a period where they fold their hands. They think it's that period or that time where they are not doing anything. They're just lying on their beds just to just hear God. Yes, there are moments like that. But also waiting in that context does not mean folding one's hands and not doing anything, but being active, actively, lingering to hear God. Even in their places of assignment, they are eager to pursue all that God wants them to pursue. They are eager to pursue that career. They are eager to stand out. They are eager to be the best version of themselves. So, are you actively involved or are you passive? Or are you a passive migrant or are you an active migrant? So I've talked about shock, so people experience shocks and they're like, why did I even come? Maybe I should just go back. Maybe this is not for me. At that phase, they experience that. Some would stay back and some would go back home because they can't even handle that shock. They were not at the beginning prepared for the shock and for that phase of their lives. So for people who have decided or who decided to go back, perhaps maybe they did not do anything wrong. No, it's not about maybe they did wrong or they did right. No, that's not what this is all about. But rather, like why they move in the first place. Why did they go back? Was it for their own sanity? Was it for their own good? Did they have something they were doing before and they maybe perhaps underestimated what they had in their hands and the thoughts relocating would actually provide a better place for them or better chances for them. And perhaps when they migrated, they did not really see any future or did not even see anything really that might come out of it. And then they decided to go back. What vision do you have for your migration? I remember at Mount Zion Fame many years ago, they used to say, don't marry a man with a television, but rather marry a man with vision. Don't just, say now you've come abroad without having vision for your life. Because if you don't have vision, you are much more likely to stay long in that passive phase of migration. And eventually, you may not really have any good thing to say about your own migration story other than just, I survived. And I survived is not the language of the victorious people. The victorious people will say they tried, they conquered. So that should be your own testimony. Your testimony should be such that you conquered. You did not merely survive, you conquered. You waxed great. You did exceedingly. That should be your own language. So write down the vision for your migration. Why did you migrate? What are the things you want to achieve? I always just say in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And that journey of that 5 years start from now. Every step you take every day towards achieving that goal. Start writing down the vision. The other characteristics of passive migration phase is grief. People grieve the loss of identity, loss of social status, loss of who they are, loss all around. And then they become tired, they become weary, and they become confused. They don't really know what to do. Should they or should they stay back? Should they just wait for a few years and go back? What should they really do? They become confused. They are grieving. And that is a psychological response. I don't think there is anyone who has migrated that would say they did not miss home, or they did not miss their families, or they did not miss their friends, or they did not miss something or someone. No, it's not possible. Yeah, because we are not meant to do life alone, and you never did life alone. You did life with people. You are not meant to be alone. Another phase or characteristic of that passive phase of migration is that people tend to isolate themselves. At that point, they might just become offended easily because they don't really have clear direction. They don't really know how to go about things, how to go about life. And they are like, is this how their lives would just go down the drain? And at that moment, they may look depressed. They may be depressed. Yeah, it happens. Many times, people just lose interest. Their mood just becomes very low. They have low energy levels. They are not able to think straight. Their concentration at that point in time is very low. They don't even have any form of joy within them. They feel guilty for whatever action or steps they might have taken towards migration. They mourn their loss. They become depressed. Another phase, the only reason, or maybe one of the reasons that may help people to overcome that phase is the community they are formed or the people they're surrounded with. For people who have families, they say family is a protective factor. If you think you don't have families, you have people. They don't have to belong to your race. They don't have to belong to your tribe. But know who are in your circle. They don't have to look like you. They don't have to talk like you. They don't have to behave like you. You be yourself. and be intentional about your own life. Be intentional about your own growth. Be intentional about forming the right community that would help through that phase. I've just talked about the pressure. People also, could become very anxious. That is also a characteristic of passive phase of migration. They are anxious. They're thinking in the next 5 years, would they have become all that God wants them to be or all that they want to be? Will their aspirations at that time have come to pass in the next few years? They're just waiting in limbo. They are anxious. They don't know what tomorrow might hold. And they're afraid. What if? What if not? Honestly, it can be a very difficult phase. It can be a difficult moment. It can be very, very, very difficult. And I get you. I understand you. I believe we have all been through that phase. Perhaps for people who said they've never been through that phase, maybe they just did not recognize or they forgot. They did not remember how God took them through that phase. People go through things, and we are all on a journey in this world. Journey towards greatness. Mind the process. Don't give up during that process. There is always a process to greatness. Process to greatness. Success is not magical. It's a journey. It's a process over just progress. Or just like people saying, I've arrived. People don't just arrive. They go through that journey. Maybe you enter the bus, you go through the trains, you commute via any means. So also when you look at greatness with regards to migration, it's a journey over progress. You don't just arrive by magic. You don't just arrive like that. It's a journey. Another characteristics that actually, shape this faith or this passive phase of migration is that people are in limbo. And this can be one of the toughest. They are thinking, what immigration law might affect us, might affect them? What's the next move? What would happen? For instance, if I get a job that would sponsor my visa, how many years, would the visa last for? Or what if I don't get? That can create more anxiety, waiting. When would I get my ILR? When? What time? How do I go about it? So these are some of the phases of passive migration. And at that phase, people just wait. Some people just allow things to happen until things get bad, really bad. Keep being your best. It's just a phase. So what can you do in this passive phase of migration? Stand up, brace up, start building, start investing. Don't give up hope. Look for like-minded people that you can work together. Ask questions. It's not a sign of weakness when you ask people questions. It's okay to seek for help. It's okay to ask. Ask anyway. Do it afraid anyway. And that has become my slogan. Do it afraid. Even when you're afraid, do it. When you've made up your mind, do it. When you've decided that you will be intentional to be active about your journey in this migration, do it anyway. Go for it. Do it fearlessly with that victorious mindset. Don't forget, your mindset actually shapes who you are. It shapes who you will become. So also your values. So what are your values? What is your mindset about your life? Keep dreaming. I've heard several times, it's very free to dream. You can dream and dream big. It's free. Nobody will charge you for it. It's okay. So don't just, become stuck at dreaming. Rather, let that dream become a reality. Dream, dream. Let that dream be birthed. I will see you at the top by the special grace of God. Keep holding the fort. Bye. Thank you.